Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We have two outstanding poets with us today, Dave Newman and Kathryn Petruccelli. Dave will read first and then Kathryn. Dave Newman is the author of 10 books, including Better Than the Best American Poetry, Roadside Press 2025. His poems, essays, and stories have appeared in magazines and journals around the world, including Ambit UK, Tears in the Fence UK, Gulfstream Belt, and the legendary Nerve Cowboy. He appeared in the PBS documentary narrated by Rick Sebeck about Pittsburgh writers, winner of numerous awards, including the Andre Dubus Novella Prize, a Pushcart Prize for Fiction, and the Rattle Reader's Choice Award. He lives in Trafford, PA, the last town in the Electric Valley, with his wife, the writer Lori Jackiella. Forgive my pronunciation. Here's a superb poet, Dave Newman.
Thank you so much for having me. My wife always says her name is pronounced like tequila, Jaquila with tequila. So I'm going to start reading from, I'm going to read a little bit from all three of my poetry books. I'm going to start with the first one, which is about a dozen years old. And it's called The Slaughterhouse Poems. And all the poems are set in the 1980s, late 80s, kind of during Reaganomics. And they're set in Western Pennsylvania, where people were really struggling at the time. The one big industry there, the Volkswagen plant, had closed down. And so most of these are set where teenagers are working in a slaughterhouse, and there's some adults in here, and they're deeply struggling. So this first poem is called Hosing the Killing Floor. The hose struggled like a giant snake in my arms, and the animal fat melted under the hot water as the blood turned to puddles, then streams, then rivers. Except for the eyeballs, a dozen or so, which collected over the grate, not knowing which way to stare, rolling this way and that, looking lost, until someone came along and found them with a boot. This is another one from the Slaughterhouse. It's an older speaker looking back on youth and commenting on a Jackson Pollock painting. So this is called Jackson Pollock Could Have Saved Our Lives. The salt bed was a graveyard of cowhides, a room-sized box of rotten wood and cracked concrete filled with billions and billions of grains of coarse ground salt, the extra 50-pound bags lining the walls like an army of penguins. We buried the skins until the leather company wanted to buy the skins. Then we dug up the skins. There is the world, of course. Then there is the representation of the world. Years later, in a museum in Washington, D.C., I stood in front of a Jackson Pollock painting, contemplating what it meant to be an abstract expressionist and/or a drip painter. I imagined the slaughterhouse and the salt bed, but it was barely there, not nearly as powerful as it would have been if Pollock had dripped his paint into shapes resembling the wood and concrete and skins, or the men who lost knuckles to saw blades, or the bottles they drank to cope with the blood, or the dead cows that hung like leather balloons from the ceiling. But why do the difficult work of looking out when it's so easy to turn in? We believe too much in the singularity of our own terrible hearts. Because I'm a sucker for things I do not understand, I read a biography of Jackson Pollock, then saw the film about Jackson Pollock. Neither helped. Pollock had a shrink. The shrink encouraged Pollock to paint his pain, just the feeling, not the narrative. Pollock would have been a better painter if he would have painted his father, a farmer, or the years he worked for the WPA, or the bar where he crushed his liver. There is the world, of course. Then there is the representation of the world. The representations I like best are the representations that still resemble people in crisis and the places they go to save and or destroy themselves. Jackson Pollock is universally acknowledged as a genius. You know that. Forgive me for disagreeing. You can't piss on canvas and call it art. This is a poem about, like I said, it was in the 80s. in Western Pennsylvania during terribly depressed times around here. And it was still usually the women worked part-time and the men had the financial responsibility. And this is about, the struggles that those men had. This is called Our Fathers. Our fathers were broke and out of work and wore ties to interviews where they didn't know what to say to other men in ties who'd read How to Win Friends and Influence People and paid $100 for the self-improvement seminar down at the convention center. Our fathers skipped the convention center and dragged us to Three River Stadium to watch the Pirates get slammed in 9 innings. Our fathers tried to balance the checkbook in ways that allowed for 5 days at the beach and school clothes. Our fathers were alcoholics and heavy drinkers, born-again Christians and habitual liars. They worked as insurance salesmen, electricians, ambulance drivers, pharmaceutical sales reps, cooks and bartenders, store managers and line supervisors, factory grunts. They were former bar owners who'd lost bars to drink. They were wife beaters, great cheaters, teetotalers, big-time Catholics, Protestants who tithed. They shoveled snow from their neighbors' driveways when their neighbors turned too old to shovel snow. In interviews, our fathers said, well, I guess so, and shrugged at men with MBAs who asked, what are your strengths? Our fathers had more interviews for worse jobs, and still they went. Our fathers were ex-jocks who wanted football scholarships to big-time universities for their sons. They were high school graduates or GED certificate earners, trade school standouts, Army veterans who did not talk. They threw hammers that whizzed by their children's heads, took off their belts to make a point, kicked ass from their favorite recliner, knew the difference between a punch and a backhand, and thought daily of choking their wives. And oh, how they loved us all. They loved us in the morning over coffee and silence, at night over beer, on the weekend with a job to do, the grass, the shrubs, the fence to paint. They loved us with homes made of bricks, backyards, balls, bats, shoes, endless groceries, new used bicycles, and desire to get away, keys to cars with V8 engines, a neighborhood where you wouldn't get shot. And they said, go to fuck the school. And they said, go the fuck to school. Now they grow old and tired and mellow and say, I love you, and wait endlessly to be touched. Fathers, you have nothing to be of. You probably did not beat us enough. So that's my tribute to the men of Western Pennsylvania in the 80s. I'm going to read from The Poem Factory, which is my second book's a poem. Also deals a lot with work and dealing with work. A lot of it menial labor jobs. So I'm going to read some poems about working for a moving company. This first one is called Hello Piano. Hello Piano. I'm sorry you weighed 800 pounds. I'm sorry your legs are skinny as a wimp. I'm sorry there's nowhere to grab, piano. I lift weights and jog and you are so fat. I'd fight you drunk in a bar, piano. I'd be like, the fuck are you looking at? But you are owned by a 16-year-old girl who loves Elton John and Billy Joel, and whose grandma loves Beethoven, and whose father built this house with a music room and sound curtains, and who built the next house, a mansion with a larger music room, with thicker sound curtains and a lower ceiling, and who must surely have $20 bills like seeds in his pocket he'd like to plant in the working class garden of my life. You and I are the same piano. We are both about to get broken. We are both about to get played. So this is another moving poem, but this one imagines one of my favorite poets, Frank O'Hara, working with us on a job. So this is called Frank O'Hara Works Hard by Not Working. And also it has a couple of Frank O'Hara lines in the poem. They're just kind of reported as dialogue. Frank O'Hara carries furniture with great style, mostly by asking other people to carry the furniture for him, then leaning against the wall and looking good in khakis and a t-shirt. The boss sometimes says, hey, Frank, get the fuck to work. But Frank does not get to work. Frank sneaks off to write poems while the boss quietly weeps into his leather gloves. We think the boss loves Frank O'Hara and cannot accept that everyone loves Frank O'Hara. We carry so much furniture just to get Frank O'Hara to love us, but sometimes the boss falls down in his sadness, and Frank O'Hara says, "Oh, Lana Turner, we love you. Get up." Then we love Frank O'Hara even more. Frank O'Hara is a small, skinny man who smokes cigarettes for breakfast and drinks glass bottles of Coke for lunch. He once gave a loading crew this advice: if someone's chasing you down the street with a knife, just run. You don't turn around and shout, "Give it up. I was a track star from Manola Prep." One time, we thought Frank was going to carry a framed picture, a pen and ink drawing of what was either a female vampire or Dracula as a cat. But instead of picking it up, he pointed and said, "Is this an Edward Gorey? I love Ed Gorey." Nights when we are too exhausted to dream, Frank O'Hara heads off to the beach, to bonfires and great love affairs with beautiful men. So we sleep restlessly, jealous and waiting for the next great story. But because of darkness and dune buggy traffic, we worry endlessly. This is a poem kind of in a West Coast style, I think, of Jerry Laughlin kind of coming up with. The title is longer than the poem. It's called "To the Woman in the Grocery Line Who Complains About the Man in Front of Us Because He Wears Nike Shoes and Pays for His Groceries with Food Stamps." It is possible that he, like many intelligent consumers, bought the shoes on sale. And I'm going to read a little bit from my newest collection. It's called "Better Than the Best American Poetry." Deals with work, also deals with a lot of other writers and praising a lot of writers who maybe didn't get the attention they deserve. People like Ed Field and Joan Job Smith, and a lot of people that floated around the small press and the underground poetry scene for a long time. This is a shorter one called "Beautiful American Songs." He said, "You really must read Neruda in Spanish. If I learned every language of every poet I loved, I'd never have the time to read any poetry, and the hole in my head would be the size of the midday sun. Neruda sings to me the way Neruda sings to me. I like it, and it doesn't take a doctorate to know that." He said, "English just doesn't capture the music." Okay, I understand that we're a country of race car drivers, football fans, crooked politicians, and rock and roll reporters. But tell me that you don't love the sound of your own voice. Tell me that the word poontang isn't, in its beautiful American way, a song. I'm going to finish up with this poem. It's a little bit longer. It's about Fred Voss, who passed away recently, and I'd like to dedicate it to his wife, Job Smith, who's a wonderful poet, one of my favorite poets, one of the first poets I fell in love with 30 some years ago. So this is called "Wilmerding, Pennsylvania, Thinking of Fred Voss." The houses are being foreclosed on, but the kids are still in the streets playing with chalk, riding bikes, and the old men sit outside a cafe drinking coffee, waiting for the bars. And I am walking here because I have been unemployed for 2 months, and what I can afford is the YMCA to lift some weights or swim, then walk the cracked sidewalk outside. And I remember reading Fred Voss's poems in my tiny apartment when I was 21 or 22, all of those wonderful lines about working as a machinist up and down the coast of California and inside Goodstone Aircraft Company, that awful place with sparks flying and sharp objects and bosses welded down to the meanest of hearts. And I remember thinking, Jesus, I hope I don't end up like Fred. How beautifully he wrote, how hard he worked. Fred dropped out of a PhD program to become a machinist, but I was going to graduate school, so I didn't have to work with my hands because there were no jobs working with your hands in Western Pennsylvania in 1989, and because my mom never made college, and my dad, a factory worker who'd been employed since he quit school in 6th grade to load melons, dreamed better things for his kids, like becoming an engineer or an accountant, but definitely not graduate school for poetry. But the directions drive us, not vice versa. We end up where we end up, not where we want. I wanted to teach college, but no one liked my poems about working as a janitor and taking drugs and reading the Connor Parra in the parking lot before work with a ham sandwich in my lap. And my professors thought I was unintelligent, not academic, and or a heroin addict. Plus, I once showed up to a party with a 3-gallon bottle of beer and everyone else brought hummus. So I graduated in 2 years with the same grades as everyone else. Most of my peers got jobs teaching, but I got a job in a warehouse where I loaded ball bearings into a truck and delivered them to factories and read more poems by Fred Voss, who was still a machinist, who is still writing poets, who is the only poet in America, who is the only poet in America who could have survived in Wilmerding, Pennsylvania, circa 1870, when George Westinghouse opened the Westinghouse Air Brake Company and the men worked 55 hours a week with steel made to stop a locomotive. And I like to think of Fred in the fire, burning with the men who had to burn because he wanted to burn, because he knew someone needed to record this. How practical poetry is in the hands of a machinist, how you can still build your life around poetry when it's made by people who make things we need. But it's 150 years after George Westinghouse opened the air brake plant, and the black smoke looked like clouds and prosperity. And now the city is a hologram of itself. Factories looking like factories, but not doing what factories do. And I have been reading Fred's poems again, terrified and in awe, thankful and humbled. But this afternoon, it's 90 degrees, and I have my own work, my heart pumping past the railroad line, the hall's coal somewhere away from Wilmerding, Pennsylvania, where Fred Voss never lived or worked. And a dog on a chain barks vicious at a torn black garbage bag, and 2 guys covered with tattoos head up a ladder carrying shingles. Thanks.
Thank you, Dave, for such a realistic, resonant, your heart and mind together in the poem, your compassion, your care for your fellow poets, your love of fathers. You know, that one poem you say, in the working class of my heart. And I always loved the working class too. My people were working class, and the elegiac aspect of your poetry, the love poem, for Fred, and you're on fire. You just blaze away. So
Thank you.
I love your poetry. Could you just tell us when did you write your first poem?
So I wrote poems, rhyming poems. I guess they were probably more song lyrics when I was a kid. I didn't grow up in a house with books. Both my parents were really religious. And so we had Bibles and books about the Bible. We didn't have any poetry, but I remember hearing a bad pop song on what was called Friday Night Video at the time. And it was called Never Surrender, I think. And I had to get up and write a poem for my girlfriend called Never Surrender, Never Let Go, Our love is young and will grow. And that was just like, I felt like on fire like that. So I wrote lyrics for years, but I didn't really read poetry until college. And then that just changed everything, obviously, as soon as you start reading and find books.
Well, around 1978, the Cheap Trick, they had a song maybe similar to the one you're talking about, Surrender, but don't give your heart away.
Absolutely.
That was the first time I heard them. And, and your poem for our fathers, that was just so beautiful. What attracts you to the poetry form?
I think probably a lot of different things. I love the music. I love the blending of the music and the style with the content and the efficiency of that. And I really love the voice. I love that in fiction too, but I don't think it hits me quite in the same way that poetry does. And I really feel like I'm in a room with someone. I sometimes explain to younger people when they're talking about poetry and when it's rough and it's too hard for them. But I'm like, all poetry is a safe space. No matter what you're doing, you're alone with it in a book. If you need to stop and cry, that's okay. I do that all the time. I will bawl my eyes out mid-book and then I will refocus and get back to it. So I think it's just this amazing place where you can just have this communion with the world, with the rest of the world is outside for a moment. You're just in the book, in that space.
Well, your poetry is so realistic. I always, excuse me, I love that. I remember when I started out, I got into poetry late when I was 25. but I remember reading Hay for the Horses by Gary Snyder. And he had a similar line, about an older guy working, bucking bales of hay. And at lunch, they sit down and the guy said, when I was 17, I thought, God damn, I hate to be doing this. Or he said, when I was 17, excuse my language, when I was 17, I thought to myself, I'd hate to be doing this all my life. And damn it, that's just what I've gone and done. And that working class thing, and it's just so much, there's such a resonance in there, and your poetry is so clear and specific. Could you just tell us how you make a poem, whether it's, if you have an image or you have an idea or a line that comes to you, like let's take our fathers, and do you write it all the way through or do you refine it?
So I take a lot of time between revisions. I usually have manuscripts that I have laying around, whether fiction or poetry. And I try to take the ego out of the self for the revision. So the more time I have between revisions, I'm less impressed with what I do. So it's easier to revise. So I think like the father poem was a couple different poems about different fathers from that era, and then realized I usually don't feel comfortable speaking for a group of people, but it felt like a group of young people looking at their fathers makes sense from the same geography and the same class backgrounds or similar backgrounds in class would be okay to do that. So I think it started as a couple of poems and kind of merged into one more lyrical poem that really wasn't as narrative, but still told these different stories about fathers.
Well, now how do you separate the ego out from your poetry writing?
Well, I think like most of us, we have to believe in ourselves and our voice to even want to create, to be a part of that. But then I think sometimes for me, that gets in the way that I think everything I write is great. The beatnik, first thought, best thought, which I don't believe in at all, but I think I feel when I'm writing it. So I believe it's great, but then I can go back and look something. And because I believe this is great, I can recognize that this is not great and rewrite it. But then when I get back to the one that I thought was great, I realize it wasn't great either. So it needs rewritten. So it's kind of the cycling through of suppressing the ego till you can get something that you're proud of.
Now, what do you do? Do you tell us a little bit about a day in the life of a poet with your life? What do you do in the morning, throughout the day?
So for the last 5 years now, I've been teaching it here at Pitt Greensburg, which is a little University of Pittsburgh branch campus. So I teach creative writing here. Before that, I worked at the VA as a social worker and medical research for a decade. And before that, when I first got out of poetry grad school many years ago, I became an over-the-road truck driver because I realized you could not make a living as a poet. So I went back to truck driving school and did that for a while.
And when you sit down to write a poem, what is it that kicks that poem off? Is it emotion, lines, an image? What is it? An idea? What kicks off a poem for you?
I think all of those things, any and all of those things. Sometimes I have a story I want to convey. Sometimes I'm just playing with language if I don't have anything to say and something forms from that. And then I'll try to make sense of the kind of gobbledygook that I put down on the page. Sometimes it is an image I'll want to go with. And sometimes those things come all the different ways all at one time. So I try to be open to whatever's out there, but I try to show up at the computer a few times a week. And so to get my work done, I've never been one to take a lot of time off. So I try to be present and see what's available out there for me, whether it's a story or an image or language.
And maybe I missed something, but when did you write your first poem? You probably told me, but it went by.
I wrote rhyming poems all through junior high and high school and even early college. I had notebooks. I read somewhere that Bernie Taupin wrote lyrics for Elton John. So I was like, I wouldn't have to sing. I could just be the lyricist. So that seemed like a great idea. And then when I went to college, when I was a junior, Toy Darracott, who's a fantastic poet, gave me a book of poetry by Phil Levine, What Work Is. And it just set me on fire. I recognized the people. It was he's from Detroit, but I was in Pittsburgh, similar cultures. And so I recognized all those people, and that really got me inspired to write about those things. And not that I was embarrassed of, but I didn't announce, oh, my dad's laid off from a factory to people. It didn't seem like social conversation the way people presented themselves, but suddenly I could find a place for that in poetry.
And before you started writing poetry in a regular, serious way, who were some of the poets who influenced you?
I mean, Phil Levine was absolutely one of my first ones that I fell in love with and went through all of his books. I really love Edward Field. I think he's just one of the most important American poets, especially for those of us who like humor and like narrative. He was always one of my absolute favorites. I love it, like Fred Voss. I have a really funny moment when I was a senior in college and I was living in like a transient hotel by myself. And I wanted to order Fred Voss's first book, a Jerry Laughlin book, and a Joan Job Smith book they were all in the same Paul Press. And you actually had to call back then. So I called and I gave my credit card over the thing. And he's like, yeah, I think something's not working with your credit card. Can you maybe send me a money order? So three books, none of them on my credit card, but I went to the convenience store and got a money order and mailed them all out. So that was an exciting time for me. That was kind of when Charlie Webb was doing a lot of what he called stand-up poetry. So a lot of those poets were really accessible to me at the time.
Well, I love Fred and Joan Job Smith and Gerald Laughlin too. They're all just fabulous poets. And another poet, working class, who recommended me to you is Jim Daniels. I mean, Detroit. He's great too, and you're great. And you mentioned it just set you on fire. You are on fire in your poetry. You just blaze away. And I just love that high octane spirit in you and in your poetry. We have about a minute left. And what is important to you in terms of poetry right now in our society with all that's going on? What do you focus on, or what's important to you? What are you reaching for?
Well, I always think clarity is really important to me, that you're trying to convey something. And especially now when lies have become the new truth, I feel like it's really important to be as accurate about the world as you can. Not that poetry is made necessarily of facts, but it's made of personal truth, and you're trying to convey something. And with truth, you can concede that other people have different truths. And I think a lot of that is lost now, as people are saying, my truth, which could be a lie, is the only truth there is. And if you don't believe it, you will be punished for it. And so, I mean, I think poetry in the best way is a place to retreat from that kind of bullshit.
Well, you do a marvelous job, and you inspire us all, and you lift us up. So thank you, Dave Newman, for just such a glorious reading. You're a blessing. And thank you, Dave Newman.
Thank you so much.
Our next poet is Kathryn Petruccelli. Kathryn Petruccelli is a pushcart, best of the net, and best small fictions nominated writer with roots in spoken word and a degree in teaching English language learners. Her poetry has appeared in places like the Massachusetts Review, Rattle, Poet Lore, Rhino, Tinderbox, Whale Road Review, and About Place Journal. You can find her prose at places like Sweet Lit, Switch, Fictive Dream, and the Los Angeles Review. She has experienced hosting events and takes seriously the privilege of standing behind a microphone. Kathryn currently teaches online, Pay What You Can workshops, and lives with her family in the west of Ireland. Here's a splendid poet, Kathryn Petruccelli.
Thank you so much, Harry. Thanks a lot. And thank you, Dave, for that reading. And I'm looking forward to chatting with both of you. So I sent a little note out to Dave today, and he kind of let me know that this sort of work theme was going to be around what he was going to read today. And it inspired me to kind of pick a bit of a bridge poem, I guess you could say. A lot of my work is a very different tone, maybe, that I have here tonight. But I wanted to read this poem. I really loved how Dave brought out the idea of class, which I think gets ignored too much. And so anyway, I'm going to start with this poem. So I keep changing my mind as I go here. We're gonna wing it. But this is called Lamps. My mother used to tell me there was a time she kept a closet full of lamps. So whenever one of her kids broke one, she'd sweep up and pull another out. I imagine her trolling Saturday morning garage sales of the 70s, buying every cheap, ugly thing that lit, handing over $1, 50 cents, maybe haggling them down to a quarter. A woman with a stockpile of light sources at the ready, while her children flipped through the living room like gymnasts. My brother leaping for all he was worth toward the old brown sectional, the rug underneath a hot pit of lava. My sister's dance moves a sensation before the crowd was stunned to silence in the wake of a tragic mishap with the coffee table. Mom could have told them to stop, but she knew sometimes you need disaster to strike, to cut yourself until you bleed, until everything goes dark. At our house, disaster walked through the front door as familiar as spring mud. We set it a place at the table, and after its belly stretched taut, sent it on its way and got back down to business. Some days you landed your backflip. Some days you didn't. I can still see her, a widow with a penchant for the practical, holding an end table model with off-white shade, its copper base molded in the form of an eagle, cord dangling, her hand gripping the bird by the throat. So I'm going to return now a little bit to what I had planned. A lot of these poems are set in the natural world, highlight the natural world, look for the natural world as sustenance, as for connection. But I'm very much a poet of place, and home is my obsession. So I'm kind of bookending the reading with a couple of home poems. All right, I'm going to read California Poppy. So we're going to start in California and we're going to end in Ireland. And this poem is part of an epistolary series that I wrote, a group of poems that I wrote as letters to Flora that I missed in California. So I spent 13 years in Monterey County. California Poppy. Escolzia californica. I'm sure I'm butchering that. Until I met you, I prayed to water. You shone in want. What's it like to grow from where the earth cracks in thirst? I have walked and walked, crying out for home, stumbled over barren ground, eyes on the road behind me. Finally, I come upon you amidst nothing. Golden tongues lapping light, sun on a stem, your green feathered hands. How have you made loneliness a virtue? I will not call you fire, even as you burn orange flash on brown bluff. Fire can be tamed. Gas lamps snuffed, candle wax drowning captive flames. You are another kind of wild, will accept only death if plucked from your hill. You, my home, the one I never dreamed, solitary, still. Only the barking of sea lions far below. A small breeze now and then. Your steady glow. And this is another one I hadn't originally planned to read, but I just made my way home before this reading to an amazing full moon. So I thought it was calling to me. This is Love Letter to the Moon. Like all good disciples, I'm a little afraid of the one who rules me. I don't speak here of blood. We're done with that. Rapacious harpy, you pull me, my body strong in memory, fluids, moods, sleep, a slurry, a slavish hope, a hopeless fury, unholy unrest. Awake again, I curse you. Moon moan. Wrecked, wept, I pluck you from the dark sky, chalky pill, swallow you, accept the consequence. Matriarch tinged in ancient language, how foolish do I have to be to write to you? I've visited foreign cities only to find your face outside my window, having taken the mountain for your gown. Proud pout, perfect cloud, I brandish my worship, wish to slip through, escort, escape hatch, mad portal, let me meet you on the worked dough surface where I am weightless, pleasure in collapse before a menacing love I can't match. Set to travel via sky and the date aligns with your full power, I will surely crash, but no matter. May this page find its way, white flag, to the lit water, that hungry minion, more faithful even than me. We're going to stay in the water for a bit here. This poem includes a line by the poet Ellen Bass, who is based in Santa Cruz. She was actually my first teacher. This is Self-Portrait with Ecstatic Apocalypse. In water, my body remembers. A boat cutting its way through blue-green sea, dolphins riding the wake, breath short, joy caught in the drawer of my throat. Ocean, ultimatum, ocean, Mira, at a beach where from both sides children shriek, dive into salted waves while I remain without voice for the moment at hand. It's easy to discount how light shudders before crests show themselves. In the bathtub, even here, a rush from the source, God we've been waiting for, waters rising like good bread, like a world thirsty for its origins, something displaced, limbs pushing against soft force. I blink and find darkness of beginnings. You, forever slipping through my fingers, ocean, body greater than ours, ocean twisting away, jilted lover, longing as inevitable end, swallowed by rhythmic lapping, rooting among bottom dwellers, eyes protrude from sediment, see our past future loop made whole, rocked by embryonic symphony. I don't blame you for the gills we gave up. I only want to put out this fire. We're gonna move to Ireland in this next one. This is called The Yearling Calves Are in the Fields by the Tesco. So Tesco is a grocery store. It's a British chain. The yearling calves are in the field by the Tesco. And as I walk past, they run to me. I think maybe they are just running or running to something else. But when I look back over my shoulder, there they are, crowded in the corner, an arrow of a herd, the lead at the point with her pink and black nose resting on the stone wall, those enormous lashed eyes, hopeful. And I laugh a little now that I'm clear of them. But the truth is, I'm also a little afraid, which is why I continue past. They are just big babies who've already known separation, who've felt the world made strange, loaded into metal boxes that roared and rolled. This is not the field they were born in. And still they came. Like maybe I know, like maybe I will offer comfort, and instead I'm afraid and so will not know the feel of their soft sides under my hand, or how it is to whisper greetings into oversized ears. I'm no yearling. The world has been strange many times over. So I give it up. The chance to caress the tuft of hair on their forehead, mingling of our white breath in the November air. How much I want to care for the beasts of the world, to understand myself among them. The field runs right beside my path, with a wall between. Okay, I'm just making decisions on the fly here. Just question everything I thought I wanted to read. So this next poem is in the voice of a fish. Everybody, I'm sure, has a poem like that, right? So I credit this one to the poet Nicole Brown, with whom I did a workshop called Kingdom Animalia. And she asked us to choose an animal that we could easily observe. And over the course of 5 weeks or however long we were together, we did kind of extensive research on our animal. And she asked us these really wild questions that just brought us to really interesting places. And I would have done the octopus because that's my fave, but we were supposed to be able to observe this thing. So I just picked the fish in my kids' fish tank. Those little 20-cent feeder fish, that's where we're going here. And I found out extraordinary things about them. So this is called Advice from a Fathead Minnow. So listen up. Here's your minnow advice. Rest. We wake and sleep by the natural light cycle, like you once did. No use for eyelid, our dream life, one of simple drift from this glass world to another. How convenient that light behaves like a wave. The ease of taking into dream waters what we know from waking life. Brilliant glow of phosphorescence in red, yellow, green, slip of scene, sweet scrim draped like a tail across the familiar. Our night a superior peace, grace of story. I can tell what you were thinking. That we watched a dream film in black and white? Sorry, unfinned beast, committed as you are to the spectrum of visible light. Imagine for a moment orgasmic chromatics, stage set in ultraviolet. Every organism is schooled before birth in the stuff of stimuli. Perhaps that's why you're surprised at our capacity for belief. The way it rides a riverbed beyond beauty, how we too can be fooled by illusions of sight. Things we thought would feed us, but instead left us gutted. Why else would we qualify as counsel unless we knew what it was to be flawed, to make a choice, then withdraw, or become a martyr for a larger cause? Disappointed? It's not instinct alone that churns our senses. Listen. You've had a hard day. Jostled in the shoal, rest from who you think you are. Find a cave, rock, overhang, sleep. Desire relaxed is pleasure. Pelvic fin twitches like a heartbeat, keeps steady. Now look out to your cloud-marked sky. Find a slit like a gill and breathe. Just checking my time here. Okay. I'm going to bring us back to California. This is Looking for Meteor Showers. My birthday is in August, right around the Perseid meteor showers every year, and every year I miss them. Above us, a fingernail of moon hooked on black cloth, Perseids nowhere in sight. We drive the coast north to Monterey. Lights of the southbound cars' flared nostrils roll through us, cloistered as we are in the small Chevy rental. Signs warning of rough roads fill our vision, then are gone again. We harvest what we can from the night. Town names we're suddenly reminded of, stories of 2 decades back wandering into conversation, collecting sand dollars at Morro Bay, freezing on a June camping trip to San Simeon, chasing lizards through cactus at the San Miguel Mission. The labor of memory halting, gray road, a razor strap we travel to sharpen it. But everyone knows it's dangerous to take your eyes from the path at this speed. Why do we risk it? What could it be really that memory gives us? That cloud curtain drifting in and out of who we were, faulty, hiccuped, threadbare. Tonight, I'd like to catch a glimpse of the falling light, if only to say I've seen it. Seemingly too much to ask. We have just earthbound tales. Perseus was guided to the Gorgon by her reflection, the real thing, fatal. Maybe that's why we need to lace our present with our past, chew bittersweet fruit of what we've known, the now too high a wattage. Straight shot that presses down hard, reminiscing is softer. A weaving, flouncy and generous, the dead laughing once again. The road in front of us follows coastline, curving left, then right. And I think I will close with, I have just two short poems that are based here in Galway. So of course they feature the rain. How can we despair when? I wait for it now. The rain. Strain to hear its night music, that lullaby coverlet, my nurse shushing, petting my hair with her damp hands. Patter or rush, it doesn't matter much. My need is for a dialectic between sky and earth, water returning. Protector spirit, prodigal God, carrier of wisdom from our star home. In this galaxy alone, over 100 billion stars that age and explode, release hydrogen and oxygen, seek each other in all that space. Their reunion, a celebration so heavy with joy, they fall, weeping, bound, we drown in ancestors. And I'm going to close with this poem, which takes me back a bit to my poetry slam roots, though it was written more recently. So this is for Galway. And a snug, by the way, is one of those little, like a little kind of cozy nook in a pub. This city is no beach holiday. Not even the beach on a rainy day. This city is a rainy day. Metal, stone, sky, gravel, and translucence. This city is invisible forces. Wave after wave rushing the stage. I'm here for it. Wet wing whose streets creep easy to the sea wall. Daisy petal in chrome. It's not quite dare me. Home, but its arms are mirrors, river uncomfortably quick, back pocket ticket, my gray dove pewter sheet falling. This city, neither sharp line of cutlery nor neglect of tarnished key, but drenched. Sun, its shy paramour, lusty body blocked, spotted in dim puddles. Soak me. Whisper what you will over my shoulder. I have no plans for warmer sands. Mud-dressed hubcap, silverfish, boat sail, silver fox, coattails, sing me into a snug, rain-stung. Come back for me in the morning when the trains run. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Kathryn, for such a vibrant, superlative reading with the themes: home, family, nature, Galway, the minnow. You just lift up the language in such a beautiful use of imagery, and it's so tender, and you're vulnerable, and you're a singer. You just you lift us up. So you're true Irish. You're true Irish and great singers of the world. And so thank you. You're just you're fabulous. So a couple of questions. When did you write your first poem?
Yeah, I remember a really terrible poem that got published in my junior high. Must have been some sort of lit journal. I had the urge to write literally before I had anything to say. Like, I loved the physicality even of pen and paper, and I still write all of my first drafts, and much of what I write, is pen and paper. Of course, I use the computer to revise, but then I'm printing out and I'm scribbling on it again. So yeah, I don't know when I wrote my first serious poem. Maybe I was 20, maybe I was 25, maybe I was older. I was not an early, real, person with it.
And what attracts you to the poetry form?
Well, I think kind of like Dave was talking about at the end there about truth. I think it's ability for truth telling, and pulling off the facade of our everyday to really kind of bring out hidden or kind of tacit ideas or cultural norms that maybe need to be exposed that aren't really serving us. I'm really drawn to that kind of truth telling in poetry.
I know you mentioned Ellen Bass, but she may be one, but who were the poets that influenced you before you started writing in a regular, serious way?
Yeah, I remember hunting down an out-of-print poetry book by Margaret Atwood. And I remember, having Sharon Olds really early on, Lee Young Lee. But probably my very first influence was A.A. Milne.
Say again?
A.A. Milne. So I grew up listening to the Winnie the Pooh stories and poems from my mom. And so, that Milne voice is entrenched, and I didn't realize it. I didn't know its influence for a very long time. And then, now it's very obvious to me.
Since Kathryn just finished, why don't you, Kathryn, say some words about Dave's poetry and his reading, and then vice versa?
Yeah, well, Dave, thank you so much. It was really incredible, and I know What Work Is was a big influential book for me as well. I felt like the specificity of your work was immersive. Like it was really, I loved it. And as I've already said, just kind of bringing forward that idea of class that I think gets brushed aside quite a bit was really important for me, and how your poems were so placed in a time I felt was beautiful. I loved, the bottles they drank to deal with the blood.
Yeah. I really enjoyed your poems so much. I think the intimacy of them, the way you could just address anything like it's a person, and the love. California Poppy was just beautiful, that you just go in there and talk directly to the poppy. I think that's really powerful when you do them. One of my favorite things in poetry is like the line of insight that kind of comes out of nowhere and just kind of grabs you and slaps you. And Lamps was like that for me. It was like kind of this Neruda ode, but then there's a line in there, something like, "You need disaster to strike," I think it was. And it's just this really powerful line within this really descriptive, powerful poem. And the mother in there is just a wonderful character. So I think you kind of, you can do people, you can do places, and you can do things and the natural world all so well. And they all came together with such music.
Thanks.
I have one question for you, Kathryn. What kicks off a poem for you? An image, a feeling, lines of poetry, an idea? What is it that kicks off a poem for you?
Yeah, for me, I'm a big language person, and I feel like sometimes it'll be a line that gets caught in my head that I have to get down. But image isn't far away. They're kind of tied. And really also reading. Reading leads to my writing. So in a perfect world, which I don't have, I wake up and I read my whatever book I'm onto at that moment, and then that triggers some flow of something. On my average day, I get up and I get my kid to school. But in my fantasy world, or every once in a while, I did have a couple of these days last week. I got away for a couple of days.
Do you rewrite much, or do you just go with the first draft?
Oh God, no. Yeah. No, I rewrite and rewrite and rewrite. And that can be scratching out a word or, taking out a the and putting it back in, but it can also be kind of blowing up the poem completely and, trying to figure out what's worth keeping.
So what's important to you right now, as I asked Dave, in terms of what's going on in the world? As a poet, what concerns you to focus on, to reach for, to write about?
Yeah, this is a huge question. And I think we always have to stay true to whatever is coming out of us. And I think that ultimately, peace and sanity have to begin in our own world, in our own lives, in our own homes first. And so, I would say I do a lot of braiding, I think, between like the personal and the political, and kind of playing with scope, kind of going from that small thing to the larger world. But I think that poets are so essential right now, for many, many reasons. We, I think, have just a natural inclination towards what is kind and what is right. Not that doesn't mean that every poem is quote unquote beautiful, but it means that we are paying attention to detail and we are paying attention to each other, and we're trying to put authentic voices on the page.
Well said. And both of you have just given such a vibrant, superlative, luminous reading, and you've lifted up my life, and I'm sure the readers too. And this is a sacred place for us. And thank you very much for blessing our show, our home, with your wonderful words. And here's our great director, Jennifer Clymer.
Thank you both so much. I'm a mermaid without my fin, so all of your water-driven and moon-driven poetry really spoke to me. So thank you for all of that. Harry, please tell us what's happening next week.
Next Tuesday, S.A. Griffin and Richard Modiano will read the poetry of the legendary Bob Kaufman, San Francisco, and William J. Margolis. He had a book called Beatitudes, and then an accident influenced his life for the rest of his life. But they're both wonderful poets, and they're both wonderful poets who are presenting them. So it'll be great. So thank you once again, Dave Newman, Kathryn Petruccelli, and Jennifer Clymer.
Okay, don't go anywhere yet. I want to thank everybody who has tuned in on Zoom. I want to thank everybody that's watching on YouTube. And I want to acknowledge Harry's extraordinary work over the past 5 years to keep this show going and fresh and new. This is the 270th episode. And Harry, you are to be congratulated. Thank you.
Well, thank you all. And thank you. We all co-create this hour together. So we're all in it together. For good. Thank you.